Hello everyone, welcome to the first ever 4LadsHadADream podcast. I am your host, my name is Stevie Clifford. I'm delighted tonight to welcome Evening Times Herald and Sunday Herald Group Senior Sports Writer Chris Jack. Chris, thanks for joining us. How are you tonight?
Hi Stevie, all good, thanks.
And also delighted to be able to welcome former Northern Ireland and Rangers star Andrew Little. Andy, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Massive thank you to both the boys for joining us. This is the first time that we've ever done this. I have been fortunate to have the help of the guys from the Gersnet Podcast. So we decided to do this for the first time. And what we're going to do first is we're going to talk to Andy, do a wee bit of reminiscing about his career and his time at Rangers. And then we'll go on, we'll talk about the season ahead, Steven Gerrard, what's happened, signings, rumours, what we think will happen in the summer. And then we'll be joined by Willie Irvin, who some of you might know from Twitter as Fateston Bear, who does a brilliant job with the youth updates. He is currently at a youth game, which will not surprise any of you who know him. He's at the under-18s. I think they're playing Partick Thistle tonight, so he will join us later in the show. We'll get a wee update from him. He's obviously buzzing after the development side beat Celtic 2-0 yesterday. So he's got plenty of insight into what's going on in the youth development department. But before we get to that, we're going to talk a wee bit about Andy Little. Andy, as you know, is an SPL winner with Rangers in 2009-2010. He won the third division, SFL, and also in 2012-2013, and the old second division in 13 and 14. He joined Rangers back in 2006 from Ballinamallard United. I'm sure Andy will correct me on that. I hope that's correct. And went to make his senior debut in the Scottish Cup final, the semi-final in 2009 as a sub in a 3-0 win. Andy, what was it like making that move to Rangers at such a young age and then pulling on the light blues for your boyhood heroes?
It was all a bit of a dream, really. It all happened very, very quickly. Certainly the joining the club and signing for the club. I'd been doing quite well for my local team, which you brilliantly pronounced there, Ballinamallard. I've been there since I was 8 years old, and I was spotted playing for them and also playing for Northern Ireland under-17s. I was 16, and Ian Durant and Bomber Brown watched me play in various different competitions, and I finally got a chance to come over for a week-long trial. And basically on the Friday, the head of youth at the time offered me a two-year contract, and that was me. I moved over a few weeks later. It was all pretty daunting, but total dream come true. And basically from that point onwards, I think I just continually achieved in my own, what I thought I was capable. I think I kept achieving more than I ever thought I would, really, at the club. And it was the best time of my life. It was amazing, and I loved every minute of it.
You touched on it a wee bit there. Obviously, you were watched by Ian Durant and John Brown. What was it like for somebody like Ian Durant and even John Brown, 2 9-in-a-row heroes? Obviously, they would have been guys that you would have watched, presumably growing up and things like that. What was it like to be courted and to be kind of chased and having them wanting you to sign for Rangers?
Yeah, I mean, it was more just the name that, Rangers, that when I found out they were interested, and this isn't a story I've made up. I genuinely thought, I think it was my mum mentioned it to me at exams at the time, and she said, we just wanted to let you know that Rangers are interested in signing you. And I genuinely thought it was Enniskillen Rangers, who are the town that I'm from, and they had just sold their pitch to Tesco's. Tesco's had just bought the land, and they had like £1 million in the bank, and they were starting to pay local players to play for them. And I genuinely thought that's what she meant. And then I found out it was Glasgow Rangers, and from then I met people like John Gregg, and I met people like Sandy Jardine, and I always leaned towards Rangers. I always had a liking for Rangers, but I was a Man United fan. I followed the English Premiership a lot more. And if I'm honest, I didn't know John Greig or Sandy Jordan. I didn't know who they were, but it was just as I became a massive fan and as I fell in love with the club, I suppose, I realised how big these boys actually were and how, incredible Rangers players they were in their own regard and absolute legends of the club that they were. But they spoke to me like they would speak to absolutely anybody. And it was pretty amazing to have the likes of Ian Durant coaching you when I went over, John Brown scouting me. One of the first men I meet is John Greig. Sandy Jordan showed me around Mulgay and Bearsden trying to find me a flat. I was just driving around the car with them, and I genuinely didn't understand how big of a legend these guys were.
I think that's what makes Rangers such a great club. When you say stories and you hear stories like that from yourself, from these legends that just go out of their way to help young guys like yourself, I think that's what makes Rangers. Everybody talks about like Sir Tiny Gallagher and things, what a massive family club it is. I take it you found that way right from the very start of you joining up.
Yeah, it probably grew. It definitely grew. Immediately. I didn't realise that. I was surprised when I realised who these people were. Some of them I knew of, obviously. There's some of the big names in the first team at the time. I knew of them because I always watched Old Firm games when they came around, and I always had a liking for Rangers. My brother was a fan of Rangers, but I was always just leaning towards Rangers. I wasn't a fan. I wasn't a real avid fan who knew all about these players. And I think my love for the club just grew and grew. And there's no doubt that's the kind of club it is. The kind of club that you've got total legends of the game, but they're the most down to earth, genuine people. And they just want to help you. And it doesn't matter, the likes of Tiny, for example, you think of the names that she has had come through her, through the cafeteria at the stadium is where she worked. And obviously then we trained out in Knockenhowie, but she looked after us every match day. And I found it amazing to think that she knew my name and she talked to me just the same way she would have talked to your McCoists and your Loudrups and all these guys.
From that, you had some success with the youth side, beating Celtic to win the youth trophy before making your first start at right back versus Celtic. Now, there was a wee bit of, I always remember watching you, I watched a lot of the youths at that time, and there was a wee bit of kind of dubiety about, was Andy Little a right back, was he a right winger, was he a striker, before finally obviously we settled as a striker in the long term. But how was it, Andy, starting at right back in that game? Because I remember getting to the stadium that day and being shocked. And that's no disrespect, but I always thought you were a striker. In your mind, where did you see yourself and how was it? How big of, what was it like to be thrown into that kind of game for your first start?
Yeah, I mean, I was always a striker. I played my 2 years at youth team level as a striker, but if I'm honest, I wasn't doing very well. I wasn't playing regularly. I wasn't getting many starts. And I was on my way out. There's no doubt about that. My contract was running out, and I was going to leave the club. And actually, as you touched on, we had a very, very successful youth team. We won the double, league and cup double. We beat Celtic 2 years in a row in the final. I managed to score in the second year in the final as a striker. But at that time, I was leaving the club, and it was Tommy Wilson who played me at right back in a couple of games. I think it was more or less filling in. They knew I could run. They knew I had good fitness, good pace. They just didn't think it was technically good enough to be a striker, I think, and they thought they'd try me somewhere different. And again, it's a name drop, but it's something that means an awful lot to me. It was Sandy Jordan who watched me, along with Tommy Wilson, and both of them were right backs in their own when in their own careers, and they mentioned to the head of youth and I'm assuming the gaffer himself, Walter Smith, basically to say give him another year, let him stay on as a right back. So I had played at right back. I played a lot of reserve games, and then that debut came the following season, I think. My debut came the following season as a striker again, and then the following year again, Walter Smith had involved me in the first team in training, but I was jumping around positions. It's fair to say I was basically training and playing for the reserves as a right back for Rangers, and then I would go away with Northern Ireland and play as a striker. So it was all a bit mad, but yeah, I mean, I can't describe to you the feeling whenever I saw my name. We only found out about an hour and a half before kickoff. That's the way it always was under Walter Smith. 90 minutes. He never let you know the day before. You never knew. It was always be ready, be prepared, be ready for the game. You might be starting, sort of thing. And he threw me in it right back, and it was a total nightmare for me. I tore my hamstring after about 3 seconds. It was basically, I think Celtic kind of thought, look, this. I think it was 19, maybe 20, 19 or 20, and it's like, let's throw the first ball down his throat and see how he does. And I ended up feeling something, and I hobbled about. I tried to get through it, and I played on for 12 minutes. But that was just the sort of start, I suppose, of what was a stupidly roller coaster time and career. I suppose at Rangers, I had so many ups, so many amazing experiences that I'll remember for the rest of my life. But I had an incredible amount of downers that were just, you make your first start in an Old Firm game and you're dragged off after 12 minutes and you've torn your hamstring. It doesn't get much worse than that. Yeah, I suppose it goes from the very highs to the very lows in a quick time. But we will touch on the injuries because, as you said, you were incredibly unlucky. Some horrific injuries, which we'll get to. But I want to talk a wee bit about your first goal, which came on the 23rd of January 2010 against Hearts at Ibrox. Rangers were 1-0 down, chasing the title. And I remember at the time you came on, and the crowd were a wee bit on the management back. And I remember when you equalised, McCoist gave the enclosure a wee bit of stick. But I suppose us as fans were never really the most patient. But as a young lad, scoring your first goal, and that turned out to be a really important goal at the time as well. How did that feel? Yeah, it was unreal. You dream of that. You dream of getting your first goal, and for it to happen at Ibrox and a goal that really mattered, I suppose. I think, again, I don't know how it always seemed to be in the big moments that I'd family in the stadium, and that always meant an awful lot to me. I think my brother was there watching. So yeah, just a class experience, to something I probably. This is what I keep saying. I kept sort of surpassing what I thought I was capable of. I always thought, I didn't think it was good enough for my first 2 years. And then I started to get a chance. Walter Smith took a shine into me, gave me a chance. And things just started to happen to me that I never ever thought would happen. And but funny thing about that is that McCoist, although he maybe was cheering or giving stick to the fans, whatever it might have been, he didn't have a clue who'd scored it. And he actually had to ask in the change room after the game who scored that goal. And I sort of sheepishly, almost embarrassed, put my hand up, and he was. So it was. I think I kind of did come in a wee bit under the radar and got my chance in the first team. You went on to make 10 appearances in that season, and began obviously to show more of what you were capable of. You scored on the 27th of October 2010 at Kilmarnock in the League Cup. You scored one of the best goals I've ever seen. I remember it vividly. It was my 27th birthday. I'm assuming that's got to be right up there with the best goals you've ever scored. Yeah, there's one that I love to talk about and I'm very, very proud of, and people remind me of, and it's my Twitter profile picture, and we know, well, maybe don't know what goal that is, but that was a goal against Celtic, which is probably the best goal of my career, because it was something that, again, never ever believed would happen to me. But yeah, that goal at Rugby Park was a bit outrageous. It was kind of the way that a lot of the coaches summed me up. They said, we just don't have a clue what you're going to do next. And sometimes it was awful and sometimes it was pretty good. And that was one of the pretty good ones. And I remember it really, really well. I've watched it a few times, I can say. And thank God I scored it, is all I would say, because and I was told that at halftime by the gaffer, by Walter Smith. He said in flowery language, just as well you scored that one because you were coming off, because I hadn't done very much in the game. It just sat up nicely and I whacked it and it went by Cammy Bell and into the far top left-hand corner. If anyone hasn't seen that goal, I would thoroughly recommend you to go on, and it's available on YouTube. Just type it in, Andy Little goal versus Kilmarnock in the League Cup. It really is spectacular. Shades, I would say, of Van Basten. And I know our friend Tom Miller rates it as one of the best goals he's ever seen, so that's certainly high praise indeed. But moving on from that, Andy, you had again your difficult kind of injury problems. You went to Port Vale on loan and then came back to Rangers
by this time, Ali McCoist was in charge. We know inevitably what's coming, but Ali was more or less adamant you were a striker, and by then you were playing there as a striker, pitched you back in straight away, and you scored up at Inverness in a 4-1 win. That obviously leads us on to obviously what we talked about, your goal against Celtic. At that point, Rangers were under a bit of a cloud, which obviously administration and things like that. How was it for you as a player to be kind of pitched into that scenario, and obviously with a legend like McCoist and things like that managing the team at the time? How difficult was it to perform in those sort of situations?
Yeah, that was just a bonkers time for me. As you touched on, McCoist really did give me a chance. He filled me full of confidence. He told me I was a striker. He was brilliant with me. He really, really made me believe and taught me an awful lot in terms of trying to pick up the right positions and trying to get on the goal score and get on the score sheet, I should say. Try to get on the score sheet, and he was really, 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 brilliant with me. But all of this amazing stuff, i.e., getting starts in games and playing in the top league, and playing with big names, Steve Davis, Kyle Lafferty, players that to me were above my level. Not to mention so many big names and that around that time, Davy Weir and well, I could list the whole team. A very, very, very successful team. For me to get a chance in that team and to play regularly, as I did sort of for the last 3 or 4 months at the time, but also for that to be at a time of administration, which is just one of the worst periods, in the long history of the club, was just really mixed emotions. Obviously, it was 1 week I was celebrating. I scored against Inverness. I got first man of the match. I got a couple against Hearts. I scored the goal against Celtic. I scored against St Mirren at Ibrox, and these were amazing things for me to happen. But then, it was a total circus every week in training. You were coming in and there was 40 press people at the gates. They were taking your photograph. The cameras were right up against the car. The flash were on. It was just a weird, and you just didn't have a clue. We were having meetings every single day about pay cuts and about contracts and about all these business terms that we didn't have a clue about. So yeah, as a squad, it was a really tough time, and for all Rangers fans, it's a time you'd like to forget about. But for me, it coincided just as the following season did in the bottom tier. It coincided with my most successful time at the club. So I do like to celebrate it because it's good for me personally, but I understand that it came just at a really, really hard time for the club.
Undoubtedly it did. It was a hard time for the fans, but you're quite right. I mean, what you achieved at that time and under McCoist, you made the breakthrough at that time. We were going through the mill at that point. But let's go back and talk about your goal versus Celtic. 69th minute you came on, and a minute later the ball was in the net. And I always loved, there was a famous thing on Twitter that you'd done, and Celtic fans were like, who is this guy? Who is Andy Little? And the picture you posted with the wee arrow saying that's me as you put the ball in the net was fantastic. I'm assuming, you've already said that was your favourite goal, but talk us through that, a goal against Celtic that stops them basically winning the league at Ibrox, and it really has to be up there.
Yeah, again, another one of these things. I was sitting on the bench and we were 1-0 up. Can't remember. Sonny Aluko, great goal. Sonny Aluko scored a great goal, put us 1-0 up. And then it was just getting a wee bit nervy. But the big thing about that day was obviously the Celtic could win the league. They could win the league at Ibrox. And that's just not going to happen. As a Rangers player, we knew that we couldn't allow that to happen, I suppose. There was a real fiery atmosphere, and it's nothing like it. I've played in three old firms, but I've never experienced anything like that day. And it was just really raw emotion of all the horrible stuff that was going on. I think it had been about 6 weeks of it, maybe at that point, of just negative sort of stuff for the club. And it was just a real party day for the fans. But yeah, it was again just another thing that I never ever expected would happen to me, and it did, and I was just lucky enough to be, maybe it was down to Ali McCoist, and he told me to be in those kind of areas and pick up the 6-yarders, pick up the tap-ins, and they count as much as any. And once again, just so fortunate, because my whole family were there to watch. There was always someone at games. My dad would come over regularly on the Stena line, as so many of the boys do, and my dad would do that regularly on Saturdays. But only every so often would my whole family come, and they were all there for that game, just on the off chance, because they knew I was getting involved. And I mean, I'll take that one to my grave. And yeah, I'm not one for. I don't like to whatever that was. I got that comment on Twitter, but I felt like it was a good time just to shut one of them up and tell them, you may not know me, but this is what I did to you.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it was a brilliant response on Twitter. But moving on, interesting that you talk about Ali McCoist, because Ali McCoist for me will always be a Rangers legend, and I feel strongly that a guy that was in the wrong place, basically as manager, he didn't get the crack of the whip, because under White, obviously the summer before, the transfers that we didn't get and things like that, it was clear that he was being led down the garden path, and there's been a lot of criticism for Ali about things. But how was Ali with you? Obviously, before we go on, and we'll talk about the third division and things like that, but what was it like to be training with Ali, and how do you think he was at Rangers as manager, and particularly with you as training and things like that? What would you say about Ali McCoist?
I'd say he's an absolute legend of the club. He was someone who, you look at his stats and you look at what he did when he played at the club, and it's like watching Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. I wasn't around. I wasn't old enough to watch him play, but to achieve what he did, and then to come back under Walter Smith initially, and having followed, the Paul Le Guen came in for 6 or 7 months, and it wasn't going well, and between Walter Smith and Ali McCoist and Kenny McDowell, they completely turned everything around, and we had 3 or 4, I think it was, years of real success under that team. And my honest opinion of Ali McCoist, he was brilliant with me. He may have been his decision for me to leave the club in the end up, but he was absolutely brilliant, and he gave me plenty of opportunities. He filled me with confidence. In my opinion, this is just my opinion, I think he's an assistant. He's a coach, because he was so bubbly, he was so positive every single day. But maybe I feel like his best role at a football club is like that, is the assistant. He's the positive one every single day, but sometimes managers have to be harsh and have to be strong with players. And it was just difficult maybe for him to fulfill both of those roles. But at the same time, I think the task he had was just to follow in the footsteps of Walter Smith, was almost impossible. And then for what happened to the club to happen, and then to have to try and do what he had to try and do in the third division and the second division, it was completely unprecedented. No manager had ever done anything like that at Rangers. And if we go on to chat about that, I don't think he could have done much more. He really kept the club going and kept the positivity, and there's no doubt that 40,000 season tickets were sold because Ali McCoist was the manager, and people wanted to come and see, just like we have nowadays with Steven Gerrard being there. People want to come and see these legends of the game, and I don't think anybody else, literally I don't think any other figure could have done what he did to keep the club going and keep the positivity and keep the numbers coming through the gates every Saturday, and that's what he did. I
agree. When it comes to Ali McCoist, as I said, I think he gets a lot of criticism, and he did make mistakes. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Everybody does. But as you said, he was a young man, inexperienced in terms of management, and perhaps you're right. As an assistant manager with Scotland and with Rangers, he was hugely successful. But that does lead us kind of nicely on to the third division. And again, in a weird time for the club, you've touched on this before, it was hugely successful for yourself personally. Team of the year, first choice number 9 striker. How much pressure was there on the club going into these games against the kind of lower teams, where we were let's be honest, we were expected to beat these teams easily every week? How was it in the third division as an experience for you as a Rangers player, expecting to win every week comfortably, and then obviously your own personal accolades of the goals and team of the year, etc. How did you find it all?
I think it suited me down to the ground. I don't think it suited every player that was in the squad, if I'm honest, and I think that's why we performed very poorly in certain games. But I also think it was just so difficult. I'd been to loads of these grounds and playing in reserve games, so I wasn't fazed by it. I knew what to expect, and so did a lot of the young players that were coming through. Lewis McLeod's, some really, really good young players that were at the club. We knew what to expect. We also knew what was expected of us, and I think some of the signings that came in didn't. And I don't like to, I certainly wouldn't name names. I don't like to speak like that of former teammates, but I think that was our problem at times. It was our attitude. We didn't fully commit to games, and we didn't fully understand that every single week we were playing against players who were. It was not just like players coming to Ibrox in the Scottish Premiership or whatever it might be when it's a big game and they get a bit of hospitality and they bring their friends and family. This was a once in a lifetime opportunity for a lot of players in Scotland to get the opportunity to come to Ibrox or to have 4,000 Rangers fans come to their wee ground. And this was a great chance to, for a scalp. And that's what they did. There's some awful results, but at the same time, it was never, ever going to be easy. And I think even the team that the good squad that there is there now would struggle to cope with those away game after away game at terrible grounds, terrible pitches, when teams just try their absolute all. So, for me, it was a good time, and I think it suited me because I knew what was expected, but I just don't think every player knew what was expected of them.
So, having asked Andy all that, Chris, obviously, as a full-time writer, he's got some things to ask Andy. Chris, you wanted to ask Andy, obviously, about his time at Rangers.
Andy, what do you recall from that one? Obviously, a good season on the pitch in terms of not going unbeaten through the league campaign, but a disappointing end to it for yourself on a personal level.
Yeah, it was. League One was, the next step to getting back up there. I think again, it was slightly better performances, slightly better pitches, slightly better grounds. Everything sort of suited us a wee bit better. For me, it was a decent season. Had a couple of injuries again, though. The cheekbone in my jaw. That was a bad one. The eye socket, all in a one night at Ibrox, and that put a big dent in my season. But it was just another year of the circus of playing these lower league pitches and stadiums, and I think at that point we just all couldn't wait to get back up the leagues, really.
I think for the guys that were going covering those games, there was a feeling that the third division campaign was always going to be interesting because you're going to these places for the first time and there was always something kind of new. The Championship season was set up to be the one where Rangers then potentially try and get back into the Premier League. The League One campaign always really seemed to be the slog one because it was just another small step. It was very much the same as the third division, but not quite as exciting as the Championship. Was that kind of feeling amongst the squad that was the League One campaign perhaps the hardest one to get yourself up for in many respects?
Yeah, possibly. Well, not for me. Not for me at all. I was buzzing. Absolutely the best season, most successful season of my career in the third division coming up, and I was just buzzing to get going again. But I can understand exactly what you mean, and maybe there was a slight bit of that where we were all like, geez, I've had enough of this. We've already had 1 year, and next year will be better. But let's just get this one out of the way. But it was just another year of you've pretty much nailed it. You've nailed it there in the fact that the first year was interesting. Everyone wanted a piece of it. Everyone wanted to know what was going on, and everyone wanted a scalp. Second year was the same again, but everyone was just getting a bit bored of it. And then the third year in the Championship was actually, as proved to be, it wasn't plain sailing. It was entertaining for a neutral, and it was a tough enough league to get out of, and clearly, it didn't happen. So I think that League One season was just a year to just get out of the way and get on with it.
Obviously touched on the injury that you picked up there. How tough was that to suffer it, but especially when you're in such fine form and having to miss so many games must have been really tough for you?
Yeah, I do feel like it's maybe the reason why I ended up leaving that the end of that season. And I don't mean that like as if it was just unluckiest, but if I had John Daly was coming into the team, Nicky Clark was doing well at that point, Dean Shields was doing well. David Templeton had signed. There was a lot of like sort of attacking minded players who were getting in front of me, and I had gone from being the number one man, the main man, getting starting every week, to just a totally freak injury that kept me out for, I think it was about 8 weeks, right in the middle of my season, and that was difficult to recover from, not just physically, but obviously mentally. Maybe took me a wee while just to get my full aggression back, and so it's one of those things. But I got used to that kind of stuff happening to me.
I say, unfortunately, he set you up for how the certain parts of the rest of your career would pan out in terms of injuries in the mental side. So do you think that period actually stood you in good stead in many ways, because it did give you that early taste of what it can be like to suffer an injury, to not win the team, to have to come back for these type of things?
Yeah, you get used to it, and you start to learn how to react. I used to just go quiet for about a week or two. I'd sit and play the PlayStation. I'd go into training. I wouldn't speak to anybody. I got better at dealing with it. I got better at the process of coming back from an injury, but it didn't make it any easier. Definitely not. I still struggled massively. And hence, now that I've retired, I feel a lot more better about myself.
Obviously, you mentioned with the guys that came in. Also, Nicky Clark was in the team, John Daly in the team, Dean Shields and Templeton. Was that difficult for you during that summer to see these type of guys coming in and thinking, well, if they're coming in, they're on potentially bigger money. They're the managers bringing them in, they potentially ahead of you in the pecking order. So there's a lot of pressure on you right at the start of the season to prove your worth again.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, every club gets that. Every club, every league. And if you think you can beat Glasgow Rangers and you're not going to have competition for places, Alfredo Morelos is seeing that right now, where he's missed a few games, and Jermaine Defoe's come in and he's doing the business. So it happens at every level, and I was just another one probably who had to quickly deal with that and come back and work harder. And
just in terms of when Ali McCoist, or when the decision was made that you'd be moving on from the club, how difficult was that for you to obviously do so well and then find out that you wouldn't be kept on for that championship campaign?
Yeah, I was just gutted, absolutely gutted. I didn't see it coming. I sort of got a wee sniff. I had a feeling, because I was left out of the squad for the final game of the season, which was Dunfermline, even though I was back fit. And I actually went and spoke to him on the Friday afternoon, and I just said, "Listen, Gaffer, if this is going to be my last game, my last trip, I want to be involved because." And he sort of spun me a yarn when he says, "Oh, I didn't realize you were fully fit. I thought you weren't quite ready." And I'd trained all week, so I just got a bit of a sniff that something was not right. But thankfully he did. He brought me along and he put me on the last half an hour, and I just had a feeling that was going to be the last bit. And then that was on the Saturday. I came in on the Tuesday at a meeting at 3:00. I can remember it all so clearly, and absolutely gutted. Like I was emotional. I was absolutely in tears. I was just so happy at that time. I was so happy at the club. I didn't want to leave. I felt like I'd done my bit. I felt like I'd helped the club get back up, and I was ready to kind of test myself at a higher level, or the level that we should have been playing at. So there's no other way of putting it than I was just completely gutted. He did explain to me. He says, "Listen, I want to keep you, but my budget doesn't stretch, and I need to bring. I've got a couple of players in mind, and the only sort of thing that I can accept is that those two players who eventually did sign were Chris Boyd and Kenny Miller. So as a striker at Rangers, to be replaced by two players of that quality, once I learned that a couple of months later, I kind of went, do you know what, that's fair enough."
Just a slightly different theme, Andy. Lee McCulloch's Even Times column this week talking about Lee Wallace and the fact that he's obviously potentially heading for exit this summer, also not played that much. It looks like he'll be leaving Rangers at the end of the season. And Lee was talking about how big a figure Lee Wallace was during those years and those difficult times for the club. I'm assuming you would echo his sentiments and just how big a figure Lee was and what a send-off he would deserve coming into the campaign.
Yeah, I hope he gets it. I definitely do. I think he's been a real stalwart, and really like him as a guy, a really true, really, really top professional. I genuinely don't really know the ins and outs, and I don't really want to get involved in it, but I just hope from a purely from the fact that I think he deserves it. He deserves his chance to say goodbye to the fans if he is to move on. he was a brilliant servant to the club. I think Rangers do that well. Generally, they honour their players, they honour loyalty and service, and they generally do that really well. And it's something that makes me proud to be a Rangers man. And I think Lee Wallace is, definitely one of those people that should be rewarded with that.
Jig was talking about how difficult he found it to walk out the front doors of Ibrox the last time, knowing that the last time he would be there as a Ranger. I'm assuming that similar feeling was there for yourself as well.
Yeah, we were told from day one in the youth team. We were always told the day you drive out those blue gates, and that's the training ground for us. He says, the day you drive out those blue gates, you'll regret it, or you'll wish you'd tried harder, you wish you did more. But I can honestly say I was in bits. I was totally caught up, and I knew it was the end. I knew I'd probably never ever be back in a playing capacity. So I was totally gutted. But I felt like I had done what they told us to do from day one, which was give your all, and just that's the way it is. All good things come to an end. And once I'd sort of cried myself the whole way to Troon and got the ferry back to Northern Ireland for the summer, I was okay about it all.
You've obviously been back a few times, or you're back fairly regular now doing your punditry work and your Rangers TV work, and obviously going as a fan as well. Do you still get that same buzz walking back through the front doors as you always did?
Yeah, I love it. I love feeling part of it, just like every fan does. I love feeling part of it. I love being able to say hello to people I know and feeling welcomed. And I still get the buzz. There's no doubt about that. And obviously, I feel the pain, and I get upset, and I get annoyed, and I get frustrated by the team when they're not performing or they're not winning games. But the good times are coming back. There's no doubt about that, I don't think. And I'm enjoying what in the large part, I'm enjoying what I'm seeing when I do wee bits of commentary and stuff for the club. I'm enjoying the buzz that Steven Gerrard's brought back to the club, and hopefully he stays on and brings a bit of success.
Stevie, anything else you want to chip in?
The only last thing I would ask, Andy, is what now for Andy Little, retired in November 2018? What now? What's next for you?
To be honest, I've been busier now since I retired than I ever have been in the last 12 years of sort of professional and semi-professional football. So I'm basically working like everyone else. I'm really interested in property, so I'm working in property kind of development work, and I'm doing as much media stuff as I can because I really, really enjoy it. I love getting along. It's a good excuse to get along and watch football and watch Rangers especially. It's a good excuse to when I tell my girlfriend I'm going to football, I don't have to say I'm going to watch football. I'm going to work. So I'm doing that. And the other wee thing that I'm trying, it's a very slow process and it's frustrating if I'm honest, is I basically set up a football agency, Pro Revolution Sports. So me and a couple of lawyers, basically Glasgow-based lawyers, have set it up, and we're just trying our best now to build up a bit of a reputation and look after some young players. I saw so many really, really talented young players just either piss it up the wall or kind of not get the right advice and not get the help they needed when they needed it. So I'm quite keen to push that on a bit.
Andy, thanks very much, mate. So that was a great insight into Andy Little's time at Rangers. We're now going to move on and talk about the season so far. Obviously, we haven't had the silverware which we craved, and there's been some almighty highs with Europe and some lows with some poor league results. In my mind, in my opinion, we're definitely on the right tracks. We're definitely getting there. It is a slow process, but if we're patient, I firmly believe that good things are coming to the club. Chris, how do you see the season so far, and have your expectations been met?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I think the expectation of Steven Gerrard as a guy to deal with, and in terms of how he carries himself, that's certainly been met. In terms of the improvement in the team, that's almost certainly been met. I thought Rangers could have been slightly better in certain aspects, and they have been. In terms of silverware, I don't think we can say that has been met. I expect these Rangers to not win the league, but certainly challenge a bit longer than they perhaps have done for the league. and I expected them to win one of the cups as well. And obviously the two results against Aberdeen will go down as two of the most frustrating that Steven's suffered this term. But I think he's been asked a few times in the last few weeks in terms of the progress and the perceived progress. The league table might not show it that much. But I think if you look at where the club are, where the squad are, and the kind of general feeling round about the training ground and round about the stadium and amongst the fans, I think there's certainly been plenty of positives there. There's certainly been a bit of progress there. And there's certainly a foundation there for Rangers to try and build on for next season now.
What about yourself, Andy? Obviously, Chris has spoke about the foundations and things like that. And obviously, I don't think this summer we need the massive squad rebuild that we needed last term, certainly. But where would you categorise this season into so far in terms of what's been achieved and where we are?
I think it was almost, but just not enough. You look at where the club sat, the 29th of December after that great win against Celtic. They're level on points, and it just seemed like that winter break just knocked the stuffing out of the team for whatever reason. Form has been really, really poor these last 3 months. But even when I looked a wee bit earlier on, I was looking at sort of the games I'd done with Rangers TV, and I think it was the Dundee, Rangers at home to Dundee, 27th of February. And at that point, they'd basically gone on a run of 5-0 against Hamilton away, 5-0 against Kilmarnock away, at home. And then they went on that night, I think, to win 4-0. And it was just the sort of things that the manager was saying. Everything was positive at that point, and that was the very, very end of February. So at that point, it was still everything was still within Rangers' grasp. The Scottish Cup was still there to be won, and the league was still there to be fought for. And it just seemed like March was the month that the wheels fell off. It was just a shocking month for the club. Big games that really mattered. It was Celtic, Kilmarnock, Aberdeen, Hibs away in that Friday night game, and so I think the season generally was just so close, but when it mattered, post the winter break and also that month of March, something just didn't click. The players didn't find the right answers or whatever it was at the time, and but generally, I think Steven Gerrard's been, as Chris touched on, he's been awesome, because it takes a lot to be a Rangers manager. It's not just getting the team out to win; it's managing everything around it and dealing with the press, and that's probably one of the biggest jobs. And I think he's sort of done that impeccably. He said all the right things, and he's been a real positive, definitely, since he's come to the club.
The last two performances have been good. We've seen Hearts beaten easily at Ibrox 3-0. We went to Motherwell, which is never easy, and won 3-0. And at the same time, these games, you could argue that possibly they don't mean very much. It's hugely unlikely that we're going to catch the league leaders at the moment, and Motherwell and Hearts maybe didn't have a lot to play for. But from them performances, Andy, is it possible to gain anything from them in terms of building for next season and the expectations of the 5 last games? Have we an opportunity to put markers down?
Okay, no doubt. I think even for confidence for the players, that month of March must just have shattered them. And they've responded absolutely brilliantly. That first half an hour, I did the Hearts game for the club, for Rangers TV, and it was the best 30 minutes I've seen at Ibrox all season. Probably the best 30 minutes of football, and the style and the way in which they played. And it just seemed to click. I loved seeing Steve Davis back in there for obvious reasons, and I think he'll be there next season. I loved seeing Scott Arfield playing a more advanced role, and then we see it again there on Sunday when he gets his hat-trick. And there were just little signs of things that you were thinking, this team is only 1 or 2 real signings away, 1 or 2 key positions, I think, away from being a far better team again next season. Because they've been good this season, and they've been patchy. Their form has been patchy, and I think you just need a couple of key members. I think a centre half is probably the most key. In terms of getting a real strong centre back pairing, whichever it might be. And I think the club's really, really close, and they've proved that in those last 2 games. Yeah, you're right. The games might not matter as much, but that's the way it is. Whenever you're playing well and you're on form, you feel like that. You feel like games are easy, and that's how it's looking at the minute in those last couple of games anyway. So it's good signs for next season.
Chris, obviously 5 games left, 15 points to play for. Andy's obviously touched on it there. In terms of next season, we've seen a subtle change in formation and style from Steven Gerrard. We were very rigid at 4-3-3, wingers, one up front. But in the last couple of games, it seems to actually have been sparked by Morelos being sent off at Celtic Park. We've changed in that the 2 wide men who predominantly stayed out wide have really come in and playing like old-fashioned inside forwards. Do you think, and also we'll touch on this with players that we know are coming in, and like some Middleton now playing as a striker for the reserves and that, do you see this as being a subtle long-term change for Rangers?
Funny how circumstances can sometimes dictate how managers need to change things or try things. I say if Morelos hadn't get sent off at Parkhead, if Ryan Kent hadn't been suspended after the Parkhead game, Rangers would probably have stuck with the same lineup, the same system. That's maybe one of the criticisms you could make of Gerrard, that they have been fairly not rigid in terms of how Warburton and that used to do it, but they've been fairly set in that 4-3-3 system, and they've not changed it that often. But they've not really had the personnel to change it that often. Certainly not to come in and make the kind of impact that if you take Kent out of it or you take a Morelos out of it, the players haven't really been there to come in and actually perform at the required level. I think when they went to Firth Park earlier on the season, they obviously tried the 3-5-2. The fact that they didn't win that day, I don't know if that changed Steven's opinions on where the system worked, or because if they didn't win that day, that kind of thought, well, that didn't work, we can't try it again. I still think that's probably not that bad a system for Rangers to play, because it allows them to get 2 strikers in the team. If you look at Tavernier and Barisic, if they're still going to be your fullbacks next season, it should get the best out of them in an attacking sense as well. I think over the course of the season, Rangers could have been slightly more flexible in terms of the approach and the tactics, but it comes down to the players that the manager's got available and who he can play. But you take into account suspensions and injuries, there's maybe not been that many occasions where he could have changed it and really got it to work. But last couple of games, certainly been interesting seeing Scott Arfield play slightly more offensive. I said after the Motherwell game that I thought he should probably have scored more goals than he has done this season. Stephen always speaks quite highly of Scott in terms of the numbers that he provides in the final third, but I think Arfield now 11 for the season. He could easily been sitting an extra 6, 7, 8 on top of that, because he does get himself into good positions. And with the amount of kind of attacking burden that's been placed on him, I feel like at various stages of the season, I think he could have contributed even more than he has done. But it's interesting that they have changed it slightly. And like Andy was saying, I think the next 5 games are a chance to really see how that works. And then we'll see how that manifests itself into how they start next season as well.
I'll put this question to both of you, but we'll come to Andy first. Andy, do you think this season will go down as a chance missed, or is it a vital learning curve in terms of what Steven Gerrard would have learned from not only his team but expectations, the league itself, and other things involved with being Rangers manager?
If you can rewind back to the 29th of December, then it's a chance missed, because to be right up there, to have got that monkey off their back, and to be, there was so much positivity, and I genuinely thought they would go on and win the league. I really did, especially when obviously they lost their manager and things. I guess you're thinking Everton's just kind of coming into line here, but it wasn't to be. So yeah, it's a missed opportunity. But I imagine Steven Gerrard has learned. You've got to remember he's a young manager as well. I've been so impressed with what I've seen and heard from him, and I think that the biggest thing for me is that now he's had 1 year. I think this has been the best year in Scottish Premiership. Has been the best entertainment. Okay, there's been a load of nonsense, which personally I don't like to see too much of, but at the same time it must be getting the numbers in. I don't know what the TV numbers are and the radio and whatever else, but people are talking about this league now, And I think with the amount of games that we have on TV, I would like to think that Steven Gerrard will have the pulling power next season to bring in 2, 3, 4, like the likes of Ryan Kent, who comes from nowhere and takes the team by storm, more laterally anyway. And I'd like to think with Steven Gerrard being the man at the helm, that Rangers have that pulling power now. Haven't had such an entertaining year, although it's not been successful as we all expect. But it's been entertaining, and there's been a lot of even for the likes of Ryan Kent now, he has added his value considerably just by coming up here and playing at this level and playing in front of this many fans and in these high stakes games. So I fully expect some big signings next season to boost the team, and hopefully it's just been a learning curve for Steven Gerrard.
Chris, what about you, mate? How do you feel? Is it a chance missed or a vital learning curve, or is it both?
I think it's both. I think if you look at what the manager will have learned, not just about the players, but about Scottish football, about life at Rangers, and more so about himself and his staff, I think it'll be a hugely important few months for Steven. In terms of it being an opportunity missed, if he had said at the start of the season Celtic would miss out on the Champions League, they would sell Moussa Dembele, and then halfway through the year they would lose Brendan Rodgers, you would think, well, Rangers should be right in with a chance of the title. If they're then level in points going into winter break, and they sign Steve Davis and they sign Jermaine Defoe, everybody would have been not really fancying Rangers' chances. The fact that hasn't happened, I'm sure, will really frustrate the manager, the players, the board, and certainly all the fans. I think it's a real opportunity missed for Rangers to put sustained pressure on Celtic, and that's something that they've not really felt in the last couple of years when Aberdeen have been the kind of best of the rest, and Aberdeen haven't really put any kind of challenge to them. Rangers had a chance this season, even if they didn't win the league, to take it to the last 2-3 games and really then see how that squad of Celtic players react. The fact that they haven't, and kind of let Celtic off the hook a wee bit, because Celtic, I don't think, have been anywhere near the levels that they have been in the last couple of years, but they've still been the best team, and if they're going to win the treble, and nobody can argue with how successful and dominant they've been. I think Rangers really need to look at this season and think we could have, should have, and could easily have done better. And as I said earlier, the fact that they haven't won any silverware, I don't think you can say the season's a failure, but it's certainly not been a success in that regard.
I think both of you make really valid points. For me, as a season ticket holder, leaving on the 29th, Ibrox was unbelievable. The spirit, the atmosphere, and just walking down out the steps after the game, it was absolutely incredible. I think there was a genuine belief, but at the same time, I think that belief, not only in the fan base, but possibly on the squad, disappeared slightly when the very first game they came back and suffered a really bad defeat at Kilmarnock. I tend to think that if we had come back strongly and got momentum further, that might have carried us through. But there's also a part of me that thinks as well that, Andy obviously talked about this before when we got to March, and Chris, you've mentioned it. I just think that some of these guys, like Connor Goldson and that, they've never played 50 games before in a season. And watching guys like Daniel Candeias, I think these guys are just generally running on empty. And obviously we've had bad injuries and we haven't been able to rotate as much, and maybe he hasn't rotated as much as he should, arguably. But I tend to think that it's been a really valid learning curve, and I suppose it's easy to say that we would take this if he can respond and learn and not make the same mistakes next year. I mean, I think Steven Gerrard's done a really, really good job, been let down slightly by the cups and things, but it brings us on, Chris, going forward now towards the end of the season and with the summer, what do Rangers need? What do we need to do now to bridge that gap and to properly make us up there consistently challenging in terms of money to spend and in terms of how many players and what positions we need to get in?
There's always a lot of focus on how much money or how little money Rangers spend from fans, media, pundits, whatever. When it comes to this summer, I don't think it's as much about how much money they spend as how well they spend it. I think if you look at the spend that the board have sanctioned since they came in a couple of years ago, they can't be accused of never backing their managers. They can be accused of allowing those managers to spend money badly. If you look at some of the signings that Warburton made, certainly the signings that Caixinha made, and even some of the signings that Steven made last summer, a lot of the money hasn't been spent that wisely. If you are shopping in the £2-4 million range, not every signing you make is going to be a good one. If you're relying on Premier League loan guys, for every Ryan Kent, you get an Ovie Ejaria. If you're looking at free transfers, there's no guarantee that guys are going to come in and hit the ground running. I think there's a lot of pressure on Steven and Mark Allen this summer that if they do go and spend a couple of £1 million on a few players and they bring in 7 or 8 maybe, out of those 7 or 8, 6 have to be real success stories come the end of the season. Whereas if you look at the 14-15 that they've brought in, the actual strike rate I don't think is that impressive so far. There's have some that have been really good. You can say they've earned their place, they've justified their fees. Others certainly haven't, and honestly some didn't come anywhere near justifying the outlay and the faith that was put in them. So I think it's a big summer for the manager. He obviously knows what positions need strengthened. He'll also have his list of targets, and Rangers have made quite good progress early on, kind of working their way through it. I think it's more about spending whatever money they do spend wisely. So if they do spend 10-12 million, whatever it's going to be, those guys that come in, those guys that are bought really need to have the kind of impact that the manager thinks that they can do. Now you can't afford guys to come in and be 5-6 out of 10 next season. You need all these guys to come in and be 7-8 out of 10 if Rangers are going to win the league or win a bit of silverware.
Andy, for you, without obviously putting you on the spot and naming names of actual players, how much do you think the manager needs, and what positions? Obviously you touched on centre-back as being your key number one position, but where else do you think we need to strengthen?
Yeah, I think it depends. A lot depends really on the likes of, does Ryan Kent sign? Does Ryan Kent stay? Sign for the club basically. That's one key position. I think those wide areas, the likes of Jamie Murphy, obviously coming back from his knee injury, horrific knee injury, and he's been a massive loss for me. I think he was, he had the potential to kind of have the Arfield. He's got that real experience down in England, a Rangers man, loads of experience, as I say, and a really direct and effective kind of player. And the likes of Jamie Murphy, Scott Arfield, those are the players that Rangers need, I think. The boys that know what it's all about. And I think he's been a massive loss. Jordan Jones will come in as well in those wider areas. But so I think depending on, you look at the wider areas, you've got Candace, Murphy, Jones, Gresda, but he hasn't quite done maybe as well as he would have liked. So I could maybe see another wide player. If Mr. Davis is here next season, then I think he's a brilliant addition, along with Kamara, Ryan Jack, who's been outstanding, Ross McCrory, who's starting to come, starting to kind of force his way in there. I don't know. I think it really depends who goes out, but right now I think the main position is centre half. There's been there's basically 4 centre halves, wasn't there, this season? There were different partnerships, and really we haven't got a first choice partnership, I would say, as we speak. So for me, it's a centre half, and it's go and spend a bit of money on a really proven centre half, another Connor Goldson type, because I think he's probably the number one centre half at the club right now. And then maybe a wider player, and obviously looking in the forward areas with what happens with Alfredo Morelos, and maybe just another option. Kyle Lafferty hasn't quite done it so far, but it all just depends really on what clubs, what players go, and what level of interest Steven Gerrard has in his own players.
So we're going to talk now about what we know and what we maybe think's happening. And this will be really where, Chris, we kind of tap into your expertise in the media field. We know Jordan Jones is done. We've had strong rumours that Greg Stewart has either signed a 3-year deal or is close to signing a 3-year deal. And also, it looks highly likely at this moment that the Jake Hastie deal from Motherwell is back on after the club walked away a few weeks ago, with the likes of Hastie and Stewart coming in. And it's worth saying, if it does happen, because obviously it's never done until it's done. as you'll know more than anybody in my experience of even just doing the blog the last 18 months or so, that some things can be done right up until the very last minute. With these guys coming in, they're obviously going to be the squad players. What do you think and these guys bring to the team, and will they? How much involvement do you see them getting if it transpires?
I think the reaction that we've seen for the fans over the last few weeks, I think they're quite underwhelmed by the targets so far. But I think the way that Steven and Mark Allen are doing it, they're basically beefing up the squad before you then try and get. You're not going to go and get £4 million players at this stage of the season, because £4 million players don't want to move at this stage of the season. There's also a lot of time left before they're on the move. Even in terms of getting another loan deal for Ryan Kent, that might be one that Rangers might have to wait a wee bit on when he and Liverpool consider all the options that they've got. So I think getting the likes of Kamara in January, getting Jones tied up, getting Hasty as looks likely, getting Greg Stewart as we think is done, and even if they go in for a move for John Souttar, all these ones give Rangers squad players, give Rangers a bit of depth in the pool, and it then allows them to focus on getting the more high profile deals over the line come the start of pre-season, and then as the European campaign unfolds, there will be the natural evolution of the squad. Now, there will be guys that will move on. You might, as Andy touched on, Kel laughed at there, you might find that Kel moves on, you might find that Grezda moves on, Barisic perhaps, you'll get guys like Gareth McCauley might move on, they might look to move on Graham Dorrans, who's also not featured very much. So there will be guys, as every season, there will be guys that naturally could drop out the bottom of the squad, and these guys can't just be forgotten about, because the squad does have to have a certain depth through it, as Rangers have found over the course of this season. If you have injuries and suspensions, you need to have players there that can come in and do that. So while likes of Jones and Hasty and Stewart might not be headline grabbing names, these guys over the course of a season should still have a part to play. Now, how big a part that turns out being will depend on not only their form, but the form of whoever else comes in. I think it's important that Rangers do have options, and I can see why they are going down this route of getting the kind of tried and trusted Premiership players in. You get these guys in early, you get those deals done, and that then allows you to focus on the bigger deals, the more headline grabbing deals that might grab more back page headlines and certainly excite the fans a bit more.
We'll touch on some of the big names that have been certainly rumoured in just a minute. But Andy, I want to ask yourself, on Jordan Jones, you'll probably know Jordan Jones much better than most of us, being a fellow countryman. You maybe seen him a lot more for Northern Ireland and things like that. There hasn't been a lot of enthusiasm for Jordan Jones coming to Rangers. Where do you think he's going to play, and what do you think he's going to bring to the club in terms of what we might not have at the moment?
I think it's really, really difficult to say. And if we were able to give that answer, we'd all be top managers. We'd all be able to see a player, see their strengths, see their qualities, and see if they're good enough. And you need a crystal ball to know whether Jordan Jones can handle being a Rangers player, whether he can handle the pressure at Ibrox in front of 50,000. He might not even know that if he is. I think he's a very confident fella. I don't know him overly well. I played against him at the start of the season for Dumbarton, and he's certainly a very, very confident player. But it's easy to do it, for Kilmarnock in the League Cup group stages down at Dumbarton. It's not easy to do it at Ibrox in an old firm, or at Ibrox in a big European match, or in a game where you're 1-0 down and the fans are on your back, and that's the making of every single Rangers player for me, if they can handle that mental side of the game. So it's really, really difficult to tell. But I think his raw ability, his pace, he gets in amongst the goals a bit. But I think he'll know himself if he wants to go to Rangers and get a starting jersey ahead of the likes of Ryan Kent, if he's going to be there, Jamie Murphy, those kind of players. You touched on Greg Stewart, even from a wider area too. There's going to be good competition between those boys and you have to affect games as wingers in a Rangers team. You have to create, you have to score. He knows he has to do that, and having that competition for places is the most important thing, because you'll bring the best out of them all, hopefully.
In terms of those big names and those marquee signings. With the summer coming up, to touch on some of the things we've discussed already, from my understanding and from what I'm led to believe, that Steven Gerrard is craving those marquee signings, those big name signings. One of the names that's been flung about, and obviously there's wild speculation, and this is wild speculation, but one of the names obviously that's been discussed is Danny Welbeck. In terms of, it's a name that's been put to Rangers, and obviously there's a link to Welbeck, really good friends with Defoe, the same agent. He knows Steven Gerrard well. Whilst that may be utterly mental speculation, Chris, is it possible for Rangers to be able to attract that sort of name? And do you expect, without putting you on the spot, and it's probably fair to say that I will go on the record and say I do expect marquee signings this summer, but what do you expect in terms of name-wise? Is it possible to attract guys like that and make these marquee signings that Gerrard might want?
I think names like that are only possible because of the manager, not because of the budget that Rangers have to play with, or the attractiveness of playing in Europe, or even the attractiveness of playing for Rangers. The only reason you have Jermaine Defoe, for example, is because Steven Gerrard's the manager. If Gerrard wasn't Rangers manager, Defoe wouldn't be a Rangers striker. So it's hard to rule anything out in terms of bigger names or marquee names, as there'll be plenty of rumours doing the rounds, and there's ones you think, no chance. But if you'd said to me 18 months ago, Steven Gerrard will be Rangers manager and Jermaine Defoe will be playing up front, I wouldn't have believed you. But a similar thing when we heard that Joey Barton was potentially signing for Rangers, we all thought there's no chance of that. And then that one obviously came off as well. So I don't think you could ever rule anything out. But when it comes to these type of guys, wages are the major stumbling block, and it all comes down to finance. Rangers won't break the bank just to get a name, but if there's a player there that fits the wage structure and that Gerrard can convince the board that it's worth going for, as I said earlier, the board can't be accused of not backing their man. There will be money there for him to spend, and if he decides that spending a large chunk of that on somebody that he knows that the fans might see as a marquee, I think they could do it, but they won't do it just for the sake of it. I think the days of making a statement signing that we might have seen in previous years, of getting somebody in to sell shirts or getting somebody in because it excites the fans, that's not going to happen. Anybody that comes in has to come in because they can make an impact in the squad, in the team, and hope, as a manager, will hope, take Rangers back to where he needs them to be.
And they haven't been in the dressing room and played for the club and things like that. Rangers are more or less at a crossroads in many ways when it comes to guys like Alfredo Morelos and possibly James Tavernier, even Ryan Jack, who we know is getting interest from Southampton and down south. For yourself, how would you deal with Rangers possibly cashing in on one of these guys and using that money to spend in other areas of the team? Is it something that we just need to accept in terms of the club model always has to be kind of to buy low and then sell on high and hopefully reinvest? And do you see those kind of things happening in the summer with possibly like Morelos and Tavernier and maybe even Ryan Jack?
Yeah, well, just those three names you've mentioned, Alfredo Morelos, if the price is right, then I think Rangers have to accept that there's clubs in England who can afford it, and they can afford a player like Alfredo Morelos, and it would be an unbelievably smart piece of business from Rangers to sell him for the figures. I personally 15 million minimum is where my own thoughts on it. I think, to be honest, if you don't get that kind of money or close to it, to get a player, despite all the negatives and the frustrating bits about him and the bits that he's let himself down this season, to get a player who scored 29 goals, it's just worth so much. To get a player who can score goals in this league is if you have any ambition to go and win a league, I think you need to keep a hold of that man. Work with him, as Steven Gerrard keeps touching on. He keeps working on him. He keeps giving him love, keeps believing in him. So I'd love to see him stay, unless the price is absolutely top dollar and it makes sense. And James Tavernier, I love him to bits. I think he's an absolutely superb professional. He just turns out week in, week out. He pitches in with goals. He's improved in an awful lot of other aspects of his game, and he's a great captain, and a different type of captain, but he's a leader, definitely. So I'd love to see him stay, but again, he's a right back, so I'm guessing the fee mightn't be quite as high, so try and keep hold of him where possible. Ryan Jack, probably my player of the season, outside of Alfredo Morelos due to his goals. So I can understand the interest, but Rangers need to, in my opinion, I think Chris is bang on. I don't see a statement signing. I could see a statement sell where they get an awful lot of money for one of those three you've named. But I think that money then needs to go into wages, because I think we do have a man at the top of the club, leading the club, in Steven Gerrard, who can get a few favours, who can get a really, really top name like Danny Welbeck. Personally, I see loan signings though. I see players who are on massive wages down south, and big players coming, and I can see Rangers paying a good portion of their wages, and as long as they are the right types of characters who come here and they give it their all. I think that's the important thing. It has to be the right type of character. It can't just be someone who wants to come and see what this amazing club's all about, but not really be fully committed and giving their everything. They have to come here and want to make an impact. And so yeah, I mean, if it means selling in order to get that money to afford 2-3 big players and a big chunk of their wages, then personally I'd be all for that.
Chris, coming back to you a wee bit more, obviously you in your role as senior writer at obviously the Evening Times and the Herald, you will deal with 100 messages a day with linked names, and only 99 of them are from me. Where are you on guys like Graham Shinnie, Nick Powell, John Souttar? Is there any solid interest in these guys? I mean, Shinnie's been on and off. We've seen him at Derby the other day. I think we can kind of rule that as being not done. But in terms of the likes of John Souttar and the likes of Nick Powell at Wigan, where are you in terms of is there any solid interest from Rangers?
Graham Shinnie, I think we can not all but rule out. I would never rule anything completely in or out, but I think Shinnie now probably more likely to head down south. The word a few weeks ago on Graham was that, having seen how Ryan Jack's move from Aberdeen to Rangers went down, that might not appeal to him, and he might not think it's worth the hassle. I think if you look at where Graham is now in terms of his career and his age, a move to Derby is probably a more appealing one, certainly financially, than it is to go to Rangers, a chance to go and try something a bit different. So I'd be surprised now to see Graham Shinnie at Rangers next year. John Souttar, I wouldn't be surprised to see if Rangers can get a deal done with Hearts. That will probably come down to money, as Rangers have found out in the last couple of years. Dealing with Hearts isn't always the most straightforward when they're trying to get the Jamie Walker deal over the line, trying to get Kel Lafferty signed last summer. Those deals did drag on a wee bit, and also in the Walker case, it didn't happen at all eventually. So Souttar, I think, fits the bill for Rangers in terms of being a more modern style centre-half, if you like, in terms of being able to play it from the back. I think him and Golson could complement each other quite well. And if you're looking at somewhere between £1.5-2 million, I think, for a guy that's been capped for Scotland, that's got a lot of Premiership experience, that's the type of guy that Rangers should be looking at. And at that financial outlay, if he does do well, he then fits the model of buy relatively low and sell relatively highly. He's the type of guy that you could see going down south in a couple of years for a lot more than what it would cost Rangers to buy him from Hearts. Nick Powell, a name that's been doing the rounds for a while. Again, I think he fits the bill of the type of player that would fit into that Rangers team. Where it's at in terms of actually getting a deal done over the line, not quite sure at the moment, but I can see why there would be interest from Rangers there. And I said over the course of the next, we're only not even at the end of this season, and there's already plenty of transfer rumours doing, so there's going to be plenty more between now and the pre-season starting, and plenty more between now and the window actually closing. So I don't think, as you were saying earlier on, Stevie, I don't think we'll see as big a turnover in terms of the number of players coming in or out. But I still think it will be fairly substantial, so there will be plenty of names doing the round. and a fair bit of interest, and not just the likes of Morelos and Tavernier and potentially Jack and Arfield, but again some of the squad players further down the pecking order at Rangers. I think there will be a fair bit of movement both in and out.
That kind of takes us, with covering all that and the signings, and obviously I think it's going to be an exciting summer. With a guy like Steven Gerrard, you're always going to get those big names, and there's always going to be the speculation, and there's going to be the wild names. I mean, last summer, just for example, we had the Defoe rumour last summer. We had Lucas Leiva rumour. We had the huge Martin Skirtle rumour, which ironically is reappearing as he's available on a free transfer and things. That takes us probably to covering most of the things that's going on. But just finally, guys, just to ask you, the last 5 games in terms of points and things like that. Obviously, we all want 15 points. We want 5 wins. But what do Rangers need to do in terms of to get a strong finish, to get the momentum, to get the positivity in terms of performances and things like that? We haven't shown signs of winning the last 5 games. Is it possibly too much to expect that? So realistically, what do you see us doing in the last 5 games? And ask Andy for yourself. Obviously, you've been in the dressing room, you know what it's like. The target will obviously be 5 wins, but realistically, looking at it now, where do you think we will be come the season end?
Secure second, first of all, as players, just get that second secured. And then really for Steven Gerrard and for the players, it's a free hit. I mean, continue the form that they've shown the last 2 games, because it's been a brilliant response to a really, really disappointing Sunday that we had across the city. And, I think if they can continue that form, but from a player's point of view, these last 5 games might have a big say in whether you're here next season. As a player, this is me speaking like I'm a player. I'm going to be thinking, I need to perform these last 5 games if I want to still be here. And sometimes you see it. You see whether boys really do want to be here. There's a few players obviously on loan up from England or from wherever else. A couple of signings who've come in and haven't quite had the effect that they maybe should have or could have. This is when you see if they really want to be here, and they'll show it in training, and they'll show it on the pitch if they do, and if they don't, well then that's the writing's on the wall, and Steven Gerrard will sniff that out. And so it's in a way it's a free hit for Steven Gerrard. 5 games, clearly want to give the fans something to celebrate, clearly want to put on performances, but for him, this is a great opportunity to just wean out the squad, who he doesn't want, who he doesn't think are capable, who he doesn't think are up for it, and also experiment a little bit, as we've seen with the formation and players playing in slightly different roles, and experiment a little bit so that he knows what he needs to do for next season.
Chris, just for yourself, 5 games left, maximum points available. What do you expect from us in the running?
I wrote a piece for the Evening Times on Wednesday, basically looking at the next 5 games for Rangers and looking at their record against the top 6 teams this season, and it doesn't make that great reading for Steven Gerrard. Obviously, 3 wins against Hearts is a good form, but you look at the record against Hibs, the record against Kelly, and the record against Aberdeen, and the Rangers haven't won enough of those games to be considered title challengers. The Old Firm games kind of take care of themselves, and the 6 points lost against Celtic make up half the deficit, if you like, in the Premiership. But not winning as many games against Kelly, Aberdeen and Hibs must be a real frustration for Steven Gerrard, especially when the Rangers haven't really been outplayed or dominated, and they've not been well beaten in any of those games, but they've not managed to turn the narrow defeats into wins, not managed to turn the draws into wins. So I think that's the biggest objective between now and the end of the season. Of course, he would love 15 points, but I think he has to prove that he can beat Aberdeen, beat Kelly, beat Hibs, also go to Tynecastle on Saturday. Be interesting to see how they do through there against Hearts after their Scottish Cup exertions at the weekend. And also the Old Firm game takes care of it itself. The Old Firm game doesn't mean anything in terms of the league or the title race. But again, it's a really big one for him in terms of building a wee bit of momentum for next season and proving that the Ibrox game wasn't a fluke or a one-off. People, Andy touched on it earlier on, when teams play Rangers, they automatically get a lift, and you see Premiership teams getting a lift when they play Rangers or Celtic, and that's how they can then pull off a shock. Rangers need to prove that they just weren't a Premiership team getting a lift when they played a big game, and prove that the Old Firm game wasn't just a one-off, that they can put together a sustained run when it comes to playing big games. No, it's fine beating your St Johnstones and going and beating a Dundee or a St Mirren, but leagues are won by winning big games, and over the course of the season, Rangers haven't done enough in those big games against the more traditional rivals, I feel like, to prove that they can be serious title contenders and title challengers, and that's why they won't win the league. So I think that's the main objective for Stephen over the next couple of weeks, to prove that they can go and win these games. I think that'll give not just him and the players, but certainly the fans a bit more belief and a bit more confidence heading into next season.
So that's it for our first ever 4LadsHadADream podcast. A massive thank you to Gersnet, Stuart and Graham, who have given up their time tonight to help us do this and to also offer us the platform. The platform pod is available on Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, all the kind of platforms on the Gersnet. It'll be available, and I hope you've enjoyed it. This is going to be a monthly thing for the 4LadsHadADream podcast, and I just want to take a minute to thank everyone for their support since we started it. It has been phenomenal, and it just proves that there's nothing better than discussing our club. We are the greatest club in the world, in my opinion, and we will be rightfully back where we belong. A massive thank you to my two guests, Chris Jack. You can read Chris's columns on a daily basis on the Evening Times and in the Herald, and also a massive thank you to the Evening Times team for allowing Chris to come on, and Chris is going to be with us on a monthly basis as a regular guest. And a huge thank you also to Andy Little for giving up his spare time coming on his discussion about his time at Rangers, and the things that he went through and the goals and the highs and lows was absolutely fantastic. To be able to have these guys on is brilliant, and we hope to bring you some more ex-Rangers players from the past. We've got Derek Parlane coming on our next show as a winner of 1972 in Barcelona and everything. That's a huge excitement for all of us here, so we're looking forward to that. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your support, thank you for listening. Ignore the nonsense, the irrelevant and the noise.